Hello, my name is Donna Ainsworth, and I'll be presenting my presentation today for my Ling 150 language presentation. So, getting started, this is my table of contents of everything we'll go through today. And starting off, who speaks Pipil? Pipil, also known as Nahuatl, is a Nahuatl language that comes from Central America, specifically El Salvador and Nicaragua. The name Pipil was coined just because a lot of the languages, especially with Aztecan descent, have similar names, specifically Nahuatl. So researchers and linguists wanted to create a name that kind of separated this language to make it easier to identify. So that's how Pipil came about. And this culture and language originates from Central America. There is a little bit of ancestry in Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, all around El Salvador, but the center of the culture and the language of Pipil is in El Salvador. As of now, it is confined to the western part of El Salvador, and there are between 150 and 1,135 current speakers. Not a lot of research has been done or census has been done to know exactly how many speakers of Pipil there are currently, but hopefully in the future that will be done just as a way to know how this language is doing. Pipil is also an endangered language, which I'll get into in a little bit. So the history of Pipil. Pipil thrived amongst the indigenous population in Central America, specifically El Salvador, until La Matanza in 1938, which is now considered an ethnocide. The majority of the people killed were Pipil peasants, specifically exterminating Pipil culture and language. La Matanza started as a riot against the Salvadorian government by communist parties and indigenous parties, but it ended up being really detrimental to the language of Nahuatl or Pipil, leaving only a little bit of native speakers alive to be able to continue this culture and language, so that's really unfortunate. And Pipil is the Uto-Aztecan language family and has similarities to Azteca and Nahuatl languages. As I'll get into in a little bit, a lot of the words and IPA symbols and everything like that, pronunciations are very similar to their Aztecan languages, so yeah. Now, getting into phonetics and phonology, this is the phonetic inventory for Pipil. There's 10 vowels and 17 consonants in the phonetic inventory of this language. It was very difficult to find examples of words in this language just because it is so endangered and understudied. But here are some example words that I could find. There's the first one is se, which means one. The second one was nawi, which means four. The third one is siwa, which means woman. And then some phonological characteristics of this language is this symbol is pronounced as T in Pipil. So instead of saying Nahuatl, it will be Nahuatl. And then the main rounded vowel in Pipil tends to be U, which is abnormal. It usually is O. But these traits are not diagnostic of the language, so these traits tend to be shared with other Aztecan languages. Now, moving on to the Pipil morphology, talking specifically about verbal affixes, I found a really good article about this, so this is why I have so much information. Transitive verbal affixes are distinguished from intransitive verbal affixes by the addition of a. So, for example, some intransitive verbal affixes that I found were akewi, which means come apart, itakewi, which means break down, and kupewi, which means breaks. And then the transitive adjective is akewa, which means takes apart, itakewa, which means takes apart or ruins, and kupewa, which means breaks. So you can tell like it's kind of the same adjective, but one is intransitive and one is transitive, and it only has a slight difference of an I or an A. Moving on to the syntax of Pipil, specifically word order. Pipil has no dominant order when it comes to the order of objects, subjects, and verbs. So we can see this in these two examples. First off, in Naja Nikita, Naja meaning I or me, and Nikita meaning she, him, her, it. There's no specific pronouns in Nawa either. So Naja Nikita ends up meaning I see him, her, or it. And then Naja Nechita, which means Naja again meaning I or me, and Nechita meaning he, she, or it sees. So putting it all together, it would be he, she, or it sees me. So comparing the two sentences, it is evident that word order doesn't really matter, as this one started with I see, and the other one started with they see. And then for Pipilin use today, it is really difficult to find examples just because it is an endangered language. The amount of speakers that know the language or are native in the language is going down as the years go by. However, despite the language being endangered, some native speakers are still here and are determined to keep the Pipil language alive. This video is an example of one of the last living native Pipil speakers speaking in Nahuatl in 2021. They live in Sonsonate, El Salvador, which is, and this is just an example of them talking about where they live, and just simple things about their life. And then Pipil in Use Today Part 2. The endangered Nahuatl language is still alive in El Salvador today through cultural traditions and dance. This video depicts a cultural Pipil dance that is still being practiced today on the streets of Nahuizalco, El Salvador. So this is just like a cultural dance, especially in ancient languages such as Nahuatl or Pipil. Dance and interpretation was a very important part of language, and being able to share ideas and concepts with other people. So yeah. And then it also does show traditional music of Pipil being played as the performer does dance. Finally, this is one last example of Pipil being used by a native speaker. Specifically, this video shines light on the importance of maintaining the language of Pipil to honor the struggles and sacrifices that the native Nahuatl people hold. And here are my references. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.